Good. We miss you at IITM.
Yeah.
Where are you located now?
I'm right now at APSDMA Vijayawada,
Okay,
State Disaster Management Authority, Andhra Pradesh. Yeah. So after you return from US, we could meet, I think.
I think so. Yeah. We have been working from home mostly, but this last week we started working from office.
Okay.
Partially.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Pompey and I welcome you back to the event. We are now about to start our second lecture of the series. Now again, may I request all the participants to please put off your audio and video during the lectures. The attendance link, hello? May I audible, sir? Am I audible, sir?
You are audible.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
hear.
I request all the participants to please put off your audio and video during the lecture. The attendance link will be provided in the chat box during the lecture. And I request you all, please put your queries only after the finishing or completion of the lecture. I now hand over the session to Professor Autry Deshmukh.
Thank you, Pompey. Am I audible, Pompey?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, welcome, Dr. Roxy. Welcome to this event. Before starting, before introducing you, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to you from the organizing committee to be with us today. And to the participants, you are going to hear the second speaker of the event. And Dr. Roxy is a leading researcher in the climate change. He is a member of lots of missions, like co-chair of the CLIBER Indian Ocean Region Panel. He is the lead author of the IPCC Special Report on Oceans and Cryosphere in a Changing Climate. He has been awarded the Kavli Fellowship in 2015 and the NRC Senior Research Associateship in 2018 by the US National Academy of Sciences. The Indian Meteorological Society felicitated him with the Young Scientist Award in 2016 for his research on the changes in the monsoon. He also is a visiting scientist in the Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, Seattle, USA. He is having a good number of publications in the peer-reviewed journals, as is quite expected. And we are eagerly waiting to hear Dr. Roxy. So without wasting much time, I request him to please start, and we are looking for a very good interaction. Participants are still joining, but yeah, it has reached 90. I expect around 130. Let us see how it goes. Yeah, over to Dr. Roxy.
Thanks a lot, Autry, for a wonderful, detailed introduction. And it's a good morning to you all. And I'm happy to see that you all are here to listen to these talks on climate change, extreme weather events, and all. And at this occasion of 25 years of your institution, I congratulate you all on your hard work. I've seen some of the work coming out from your university and department. And so here I am working at the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology. I just want to confirm that you can see my laser pointer. Can you see my laser pointer?
Yeah, it's visible.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So we work at the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, that's the IITM, under the Ministry of Earth Science. We have around 150 or more scientists working here, working on different aspects of tropical meteorology, of monsoon, and we have a center on climate change as well. So around 30 plus scientists are working at the Climate Change Center, working solely on changes in the climate system and how it affects the life around us. And when we are talking about the life around us, one of the most visible impacts from climate change are the extreme weather events. So I heard from Atri in the morning that we know that carbon dioxide emissions are increasing, but it may not be always visible to us how these changes are occurring. And maybe it's not each and every one of us are not feeling the impact. But I will show in this talk how climate change and extreme weather events are at our doorstep or at our neighbors' doorsteps and affecting us in a large way. So, particularly, I'll be showing how ocean warming is impacting these extreme weather events. Yeah. So let's get on to the topic. So if you look at the chart here, you can see this is the temperature change during the recent decades. So starting from 1880s to 2010s. And we can see it's only going up, right? And this shows that we are living in the warmest decades ever recorded in the human history. So the aggregate change, the average change, global change is about 1.2 degrees Celsius in the recent decades. And there is no going back because carbon dioxide emissions, whatever we are having is steadily increasing. And we will see if there's a way back. Can we go back? Are extremes here to stay, right? So if we look at, most of you, especially the students were born in, I guess, late 1990s or early 2000s. So you are living at an anomalous world where the temperature change are the warmest. Yeah. So we are generally living at during the warmest decades in the human history. And if you look at the impact just on the temperature, this is the top 10 hot years in the recorded history with instrumental records. And you can see, you don't see any number starting with 1 or 1999, right? Almost all of these top hot years are starting with a 2. And most of these are post 2010s. So we can see the warmest or the hottest years ever recorded are in the recent period. So every year we are breaking some record. So 2019 is the second warmest, 2016 is the warmest. And we are reaching that 1.2, we have reached that 1.25 degrees Celsius in the recent years. And we might cross 1.5 degrees Celsius, which the policymakers and globally we are trying to stop the global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius, so that the impact of extreme weather events are lesser. So let's see how these extreme weathers are manifesting all over India. I'll be focusing mostly on India. I'll focus some over extremes over land, some extremes over the ocean as well, and see how they are connected to changes in climate. So this is a picture of Mumbai. There is many stories behind this picture. This is just a representative picture. Many of our cities might look like this. Many of the coastal cities, you can see high-rise buildings on one side. You can see slums on the other side. So at first, this looks like a beautiful picture, especially if you If you have seen pictures of European cities, you might see a single color painted on the roof. So, but these pictures, these blue colors which you see over the slums are not the paint, but these are the tarpaulins. So we generally get blue tarpaulins. So this is because they don't have a solid roof. The people living here don't have a solid roof. So to avoid the risk coming from extreme rains and floods and winds, they have used the tarpaulins to cover their roofs. So, and if we look back some 50, 100 years back, most of these areas would be having mangroves. There would have been a big river flowing through the middle. But all these have changed, and the impacts are also large on these kind of cities. So I will come back to this image again later. This is a picture taken by Johnny Miller. It's called Unequal Scenes because of the haves on the top and the have-nots below, vulnerable population below, a dense population. So we'll come to this picture again later on how climate change and extreme weather events are affecting our cities. So let us have a look at how the extremes have manifested in the recent years. So human memory is quite short, right? So which is one reason why it is easy for politicians, policymakers to focus on very short-term things and forget about climate change. And which is one reason I am coming back to 2019 before 2020. So if you look at the extremes in 2019, there has been many extremes in 2019 as well. So we say 2020 was a year of extremes. That's true, especially because of COVID. But again, if you look at 2019 or the years back, we have been seeing extremes, one extreme after the other, across the country. So if you look at the north of India, we can see there have been snow-related extremes, snow avalanches or changes in snow or cold waves. Totally, there have been about 19 major weather events, claiming over 1,500 lives in 2019. These numbers might be underestimated. And you can see this is from CSE down to earth based on IMD data. If you look at all across India, one of the prominent extreme are the floods. These green lines show the regions where the floods have been acting. This includes northeastern parts also. Many times data misses the northeastern parts, including Assam and all. So every year you can see Kashiranga, these regions, northeastern regions, the floods over these regions are a persistent feature. Similar for the West Coast region as well, parts of East Coast as well. And we have heat waves very often this year, this recent years. 2019 also we had thunderstorms, lightning. 2020 thunderstorms and lightning were, I mean, it was in the news because many people died. So many lives are lost due to extremes all across India. So this is just to remind that extremes have been happening very frequently all across India. And now if we extremes in 2020, some of the extremes were quite different compared to the earlier extremes. And we also had COVID. So if we remember early in May and early June, we were eagerly waiting for the monsoon rains to come. But we had many extremes coming instead of the monsoon rains. One were the locust swarms, which came from North India to spanning all over North India and even coming to parts of South India up to Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and all. So there were reports from many parts of South India. So it means it covered a larger region which we have never seen in the last several decades. So I will talk a bit about these locust swarms as well here. And before the monsoons came, we had back-to-back cyclones, both on the East Coast, Cyclone Amphan, many of you know, Maybe some of you might have felt the impact on parts of Northeast and Assam as well. It went through the Sundarbans, hit Kolkata also partially, one of the most populated region on the East Coast. And on the West Coast, so this was a back-to-back cyclone. So late May, Cyclone Amphan happened, and early June. So this is during the monsoon onset period, we have to remember. And this moved along the West Coast, very close to the West Coast of India, and almost scraped near through Mumbai. So two back-to-back cyclones coming close to the metropolitan cities of India. And cyclones, you know, they derive their energy from the oceans. So it is quite important. I think we have a talk tomorrow more on that. So back-to-back cyclones, right? And heat waves as well. So before the monsoons arrived, most of Northwest India and Pakistan, this is now a permanent feature again during April, May, and early June. We are having heat waves, record temperatures. You can see some of the temperatures are going above 50 degrees Celsius. Now, many of these extremes have an oceanic origin, and they are fueled by warm ocean temperatures. So that is the point I'm making here. We'll go through some simple dynamics and thermodynamics. I'm not going into much details to complicate the scenario. And again, so I told you we were expecting the monsoons, and once the monsoons came, it came with a lot of floods, extreme rainfall events along the west coast in Mumbai and Kerala. So Kerala had back-to-back floods in 2018 and 2019, and again, those were phenomenal floods. And 2020 again floods resulting from landslides and heavy rain events. No, this was not a large-scale flood, but still it impacted the life. Mumbai floods is almost a permanent feature now. Northeast floods also, you can see the famous one on Rhino, the Kashiranga parts getting flooded. It's very common. So all this, the moisture and the temperature driving these extremes have an oceanic origin. So let us get into the driving factor of these extremes. So I am showing this with cartoon from Calvin and Hobbes. Some of you might have read Calvin and Hobbes, I guess. Let me use a highlighter here. Yeah. So each of these panels show different aspects of climate change. So the first panel is Calvin asking his mom, what is greenhouse gas effect? So if you look around, there are many people, especially both in developed countries and developing countries, on still, despite the data and evidence showing that climate change is happening, asking if there is something like greenhouse gas effect, is climate change really happening? But if you look at the basic physics behind greenhouse gas effect, we will know it's pretty straightforward. Even without data, we have a lot of data and evidence, but still with the basic physics itself, we can explain climate change. So it's basically that there are more pollutants or carbon dioxide in the air trapping in the sun's heat, and that is affecting the global climate. And the thing is that the carbon dioxide emissions, whatever we are having emitting into the air, remains for a long time, which is why Calvin is screaming. So you will be gone when it happens, but I won't be. I won't be, right? So the impacts of climate change are long-lasting. And then again, the fourth panel shows how we are reacting to climate change. So Calvin is concerned about climate change, but he wants to go around with the car all around. So we are not doing anything about climate change. So that is the entire story of climate change in this Calvin and Hobbes cartoon. Now coming into carbon dioxide, so I will talk a little bit about carbon dioxide, greenhouse gas emissions, and all. I'll quickly go through these slides. So if you look at the greenhouse gas emissions, 76% is coming from carbon dioxide. We have other greenhouse gas emissions also, which are high potential, but we are focusing on carbon dioxide because the ratio of emissions are quite large and impact so far has been quite large. And 87% of this comes from fossil fuels. And if you compare the carbon dioxide concentrations in the pre-industrial and the current 2020 scenario, we can see that it was around 280 parts per million in the pre-industrial. Now it is almost around 415 parts per million, and it's increasing by around 2.7 parts per million every year. And even this year, this hasn't changed much. So the increase is almost around 50%. That's quite huge for carbon dioxide emissions. And we might think that, so there has been a lot of debate whether due to COVID, the carbon dioxide emissions have come down. So in fact, carbon dioxide emissions have come down. So this is a figure from 1970s to late 2020s, the recent period, which shows the carbon dioxide emissions in metric tons of carbon dioxide per day. You can see on the left y-axis, right? And we reach almost 100 metric tons emissions per day. That's quite huge. And because of COVID and decreased the emissions in individual countries, the emissions came down up to 26%. That's almost about 80 or around per day. So you can see in this zoomed in scenario as well, January, February up to May, there was carbon dioxide emissions were coming down. But does this have an impact? I would say the impact of this temporary reduction is not much, because carbon dioxide emissions and concentrations are a totally different thing. That is because whatever emissions we have already made, it stays in the atmosphere for a long time. That's because carbon dioxide have a long lifespan. It will remain in the air for several hundreds of years, which is why Calvin is screaming about this scenario. So if you look at this figure, I want you all to remember this figure and the essence of one of the main essence of this talk, because this shows the carbon dioxide pulse remaining in the atmosphere. Suppose, so take my case, I am like 40 years old and I stop all carbon emissions today, right? Which is, we say it is 100 units or 100%. And by the time I die, suppose the average lifespan is 80 years old. So I have around 40 years more. And so I am marking this place, okay. So even if I stop all the carbon dioxide emissions now, still about 50% of it will remain even after I have disappeared from the planet. So it's the same for all of you. So, so for the youngsters, suppose you are around 20 years. So I'm not predicting when you are disappearing from this planet, but you can see all the carbon dioxide emissions which are emitted now, or your colleagues or in India, US, anywhere emitted now, still will remain after at least 40% will remain even after 60 years or 80 years. So even after 100 years, you can see the reduction is less. So a lot of this carbon dioxide is absorbed by atmosphere, but it still will take several thousands of years. So even after thousands of years, you can see more than 20% of the carbon dioxide still remains in the atmosphere, which means the impact is quite large, unless we find some technique to sequester, store the carbon dioxide back from the atmosphere, which is very expensive. So now coming on to the oceans. Why are oceans quite important in this global warming scenario? It's quite simple. That's because ocean takes up more than 90% of the heat from global warming. It's not the atmosphere, it's not the land, not the ice. Otherwise, if it was atmosphere, the impact would have been quite huge, because the atmosphere would have heated up like a boiling pan. And the reason is because the ocean has the water has a high specific heat capacity. So it's acts like a big, deep reservoir. So almost all of Earth heat goes into the oceans. The rate is about 8 zetajoules per year. So it's easy to remember this way. Imagine all the electricity we produce yearly. Multiply that by 150. Sorry. So multiply that by 150. So that is how much heat we are producing. The ocean is absorbing every year. Okay. So what happens with ocean warming, such a huge ocean warming? A lot of this warming is reflected in the surface. So here I have shown a very simplistic picture. You can see that the ocean surface here is quite warm. And when we have warmer oceans, it keeps the air warm and humid. It enhances the convection and makes the air unstable. So you might have learned about adiabatic lapse rate and all as you go up into the atmosphere and all. So I'm not getting into all these technical details, but generally with a warmer ocean, we have more warm and humid air, and it makes the air unstable and changes the atmospheric circulation, right? So that is a very basic response to climate change and ocean warming. So I hope you have understood until there. Now, coming to one of the extremes that we saw in this year. So I talked about locust swarms coming from the north. So how is it connected to weather extremes? So here's a picture on how the locust swarm started. So it actually started from the east of Arabian Peninsula and then moved on to India through Arabian Peninsula, yeah, Africa, Arabia to South Asia. So how it happened? It actually followed the heavy rains which happened over the Western Indian Ocean region. So Western Indian Ocean region, I'm marking it here in this map, and also in this map which shows the sea surface temperature. So this is the climatological sea surface temperature in the Indian Ocean during the last several years. So you can see that I have marked temperatures above 28 degrees Celsius with warm colors, red colors, and the rest is cold temperatures. So Western Indian Ocean, you can see, is generally cool temperatures below 28 degrees Celsius, 27, 26 degrees Celsius. So generally, this is a place which doesn't support convection. Okay, so convection requires warm temperatures. And if you see the figure on the right, you can see I have plotted the red colors here. These are the late 2000s. So you can see the temperatures over the Western Indian Ocean has increased from around 26.5 degrees Celsius, and they have reached very high temperatures, about 28 degrees Celsius. So these are temperatures which are very conducive for atmospheric convection. Okay, so this resulted in a lot of storms in the Western Indian Ocean in the recent years, especially 2018, 2019, and 2020. And these unseasonal rains were, last upon this desert region over East Africa, triggered a lot of vegetation there, and a lot of this encouraged or favored a lot of locust swarms, because locusts need vegetation. These are desert locusts. And then again, later they followed the winds and the moisture through the Arabian Peninsula to northwest India. And there again, if you remember, we had a lot of unseasonal rains in March, April, May due to western disturbances and other activities in the over North India, which helped the locust swarms to spread across India. So that is one way how the extremes in weather are affecting the entire subcontinent and surrounding regions of the Indian Ocean, right? I hope you understood a bit of it. Now coming to extremes, other extremes. So cyclones were other extremes. I showed back-to-back cyclones. We will dissect one of the cyclones, Cyclone Amphan. So many of you might know about cyclones. Cyclones happen only over the ocean mostly, right? And that the reason is because ocean can support warm temperatures because of its specific heat capacity. It can support warm temperatures for a long time, and it provides adequate moisture. So if you look at the conditions prior to Cyclone Amphan, okay, the temperatures were quite high. Bottom, you can see the climatological conditions over the Indian Ocean. Focus on the Bay of Bengal region. The temperatures are below. There isn't much red colors here, which means it's generally below 30 degrees Celsius. But prior to Amphan, you can see the temperatures are going from 30, 31, 32 up to 33 degrees Celsius over here. So these are record temperatures driven by climate change. If you plot the average temperatures over this region for a long time, you can see these temperatures are increasing monotonously. And we have never seen these kind of high values earlier. So what we have seen is that the ocean heat content and the temperatures led a rapid intensification of the cyclone Amphan, from a category 1 cyclone, which is around 100 km per hour, to a category 5 cyclone in just 18 hours. So that is like overnight. You are so when you went to sleep, you are seeing a category 1 cyclone, weak cyclone, and when you woke up, you are seeing a category 5 cyclone, super cyclone at your doorstep. So this might have affected the entire East Coast and north of it, right? So the impact is huge. Even the Ministry of Earth Science have installed some buoys under the National Institute of Ocean Technology and INCOIS in the Bay of Bengal. So even those buoys recorded these high temperatures just before Cyclone Amphan. So temperatures shooting up to 34 degrees Celsius on some of these days, which are a proof that these warm temperatures have an important role in rapid intensification of cyclones. And can we predict these kind of events? So with improved models coming up, technology, supercomputers. One of the fastest supercomputer is in our institution in IITM. It's called Pratyush. You can look it up. So with all these technologies, we are able to improve our cyclone forecasting, the landfall of the cyclones. For example, Cyclone Amphan, the track was pretty well predicted. You can see the track of Cyclone Amphan. So we have been able to reduce the human life lost during these cyclones. So if you look at 1999 super cyclone, we were running on 5-digit numbers, right? And we are able to come down to 2-digit or 3-digit, somewhere below 100 impact. And also the area of evacuation also have decreased from a large area to a lower area. So the expenses incurred in these cyclones have decreased. But one problem is cyclone forecasts have improved, lives have saved, but cyclone characteristics also have saved. So you saw that Cyclone Amphan has intensified quite rapidly overnight. So this kind of rapid intensification has not been, I mean, the models are unable to pick up this kind of rapid intensification because of global warming. So that is one thing we need to see in models. So cyclones affect the monsoon onset as well. The monsoon, there are cyclone monsoon interactions. So if I will quickly go through this. So the green colors here are the actual onset of monsoon this year, and the red colors are the normal onset of monsoon. So we know that Cyclone Amphan happened in the Bay of Bengal. In this way, it went to the north, right? This is a rough track. And this happened just before the onset. So it took away all the moisture away from mainland India. And as a result, there was a lull in the actual onset of monsoon in the Bay of Bengal region, because it took away the monsoon moisture and winds away from this region. But there was a back-to-back cyclone Nisarga happened just after that, and a lot of these rains went inland India also, which is why you can see a curve here and then like this. the onset is going like this. So which means there are cyclone monsoon interactions. So cyclone itself is an extreme weather event, and this weather event is interacting with our monsoon system. But if you look at later, so I said Nisarga induced a lot of moisture incursion and winds inland. As a result, a slow onset gained pace and reached, covered all of India earlier than usual. So if you look at the dates closely, so initially, okay, you start from 1st June, right? The red color is 1st June, 5th June. It should cover entire India by 8th July. But the monsoon here covered the entire country almost 2 or 1 week earlier than usual. So you can see around 26th June, 25th June, the monsoon covered the entire country. So because of more available moisture and enhancing the cyclone, enhancing the monsoon. That is one of the reasons, right? So extremes impact our monsoon system as well. So another feature I'm quickly going through is we had a lot of lightning during this period, especially the monsoon onset period. So what was happened is that you saw the heat waves there earlier in one of the figures, right? Strong heat waves across North India. And these heat waves also might have helped the monsoon incursion. Whatever it is, a lot of moisture was available in North Central India earlier than usual. And this drove, along with the heat, available heat over this region, drove a lot of thunderstorms. So now the charging of these thunderstorms, especially if the monsoon is not well developed, you might have thunderstorms because if you have a well-developed cloud, imagine a well-developed cloud, you might have the lightning discharge within the cloud itself. But if you don't have well-developed monsoon convective activity, the discharge may be to the land, which is why we saw a lot of lightning happening and a lot of lives were lost during this period. So you can see a lot of interactions. These are interesting climate problems, extreme weather event problems, which some of you might can take up and study. Now, the monsoon, now coming to the monsoon itself is changing. So, which is what I'm showing here. IMD has a very long-term data starting from 1870s to 2020s. So if you look at the long-term data, this is what you see. This is the all India rainfall anomaly percentage departure. Okay, you can see some up to 30% and minus 30% off from the mean. So if you look at the earlier period, so here the wet years are denoted by the blue. The drought years are denoted by the red colors. So if you look at the earlier period, yeah, I am marking it here. I hope you can see the marking. You can see that the blue colors and the red colors are like intermittent. You have some wet years, you have some drought years and all, right? But if you look at the later period, you can see the number of red colors are quite large, right? So which means there are more droughts happening. And if you look at the recent period here, I'm sorry, there are a lot of markings here. If you look at the recent period here, you can see there are no wet years there. And the intense drought years are more. So are droughts increasing? That is one thing which is possibly happening with the monsoon. And at the same time, so which means, and if you look at regional aspects, it is much more pronounced, especially if you look at Central India. I'll show in this next figure. I'm not going into much details due to lack of time. So if you look at the next image here, so this is the trend in mean rainfall. The left figure shows the trend in mean rainfall, and the blue colors show the region where the mean rainfall, the total rainfall during the summer monsoon is decreasing. So you can see, especially over large parts of India, okay, the mean rainfall is decreasing largely. Okay, and at the same time, if you look at the figure for the extreme weather events, so the red colors here are regions where the extreme rainfall events increasing. So at the same region where the mean rainfall is decreasing, the extreme rainfall events are also increasing. And this is true for, I mean, at least the extreme case scenario is true for Assam as well. You can see the bright red colors over that region, which means heavy rainfall events are increasing over that region, right? So on an average, not true for all regions, but particularly true for Central and North India, you can see the total rainfall is decreasing since 1950s, and heavy rainfall events are increasing at the same period. So this makes it quite difficult for all of our lives, especially the farmers. So which means that the monsoon patterns are getting irregular. We are having long dry periods intermittent with heavy rainfall events. So that is the pattern we are having. So we have a day 1 here, day 2 here, no rain, day 3 here, no rain, and suddenly all the rain coming on day 4, yeah, damaging the crops. That's what we are seeing here. So that is affecting the economy as well, and how the livelihood, socioeconomic livelihood of people all over India. And there has been a study, a recent study. This was published just a few days back, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, by Richardson et al. So what they are showing is that deaths due to suicide has increased by 18.7% during floods and 3.7% during droughts. Now the interesting thing is that we might think that the suicides are more during droughts, and this study, at least statistically, they show that it's more during floods. I have not gone into the details of this on why it is happening. It may be because the damage to property is much more larger during floods. I don't know, but this is something which needs to be explored. Now, when we come to forecasts and all, we generally look on rainfall forecast, right? But the thing is that we need integrated forecast, because these extremes are acting together, and it also depends on how the local demography is, how the local geography is. So we need integrated forecasting systems which takes care of the local geomorphology, elevation and all, and the local socio-economic conditions, land use, land cover change. And this should be presented as risk based on the hazard, vulnerability and exposure. So we have good working rainfall forecast, but we need to integrate all this together for a efficient forecast system. And that is already happening. The Ministry of Earth Science have, on experimental basis, they have installed a new flood warning system for Mumbai, which integrates the tides, the sea level changes, the rainfall, the local infrastructure and all. It's called iFlows. So so efforts like this should be replicated across the country so that we can address these kind of issues. Now, I'm not sure if I have actually how much time I have to finish this presentation. Could you?
You have enough time. I guess you have schedule is up to 11:30. You can continue for 10 more minutes, I guess.
Okay. So I had some interesting slides on how it is changing over the ocean as well. Maybe I will go through it quickly, because I need to connect all of this. So one of the aspects, so we are always concerned about changes over the land, but there are changes over the ocean which are impacting us, and also the ecosystem across. So one is the sea level rise. So one of the largest sea level changes are over the Indian Ocean, and this affects the entire Indian Ocean countries, including Africa, South Asia, and East Asia. So the sea level is increasing all over, and this has an impact. How much is the sea level change? The sea level change, if you look at the sea level change, it's around 3 to 6 centimeter per decade. Now that may look small, but if you look at, if you consider it as 5 centimeter per decade, okay, for a location, and consider it for the 100 years, that is around half a meter, 50 centimeter change, and many of the islands or low-lying lands are below that 50 centimeters. So it can have a huge impact. And the sea level change is non-uniform. The reason is because the sea level change is not just because of melting ice glaciers, but also because of ocean warming. Water expands, the volume of water expands as it warms. Yeah. So on the right, you can see that there are a lot of observations. These dots just represent the observations across the Indian coast and over the ocean. So we have been recording these sea level changes for a long time. And you can see that over Mumbai, the sea level has been monotonously increasing for a long time, same over Kolkata and other regions as well. You can see it's around 5 millimeter per year, which translates to 5 centimeter per year. And this is having a huge impact as well. So there is a story from nearby. This looks like a rodent. It's a rodent, but it's a melamine. It's called a melamine. So this is the first mammalian species to be extinct due to anthropogenic climate change. We never knew about such an extinction earlier. So this is a recorded extinction due to climate change, and that is because these melamines were found only in one small island in the fringes of Indian Ocean over this region. Yeah. So this island was flooded due to sea level rise and tide changes and all, driving it to extinction. Now there are stories from nearby also. This is from Gulf of Mannar, south of Bay of Bengal. You can see this beautiful island on top some decades back, and now how it is. So sea level changes and other changes directly impact these regions, which means the impact of climate change and extreme sea level rise is on our doorstep. Now we can do many things like artificial reef deployment over here, or planting seagrass to revive the ecosystem over here. So many of these efforts have been happening. So it is possible. So this is an example to say that it is possible to bring back the environment, degraded environment due to climate change. People are working towards it. So seagrass, because seagrass can store a lot of carbon dioxide, absorb it, and also it can restore ecosystems. So what you see here is how over those regions in one island and regions where the marine life came back to life over those regions because of seagrass restoration, which means there is good news also that we can interact and help the environment. So I'm not getting into all these details. And so the last concept I want to talk about is compound events, where all these events act together. So this is a, I hope, it's comical, right? It's a picture from a cartoon from Times of India. It shows how different we have to face different events in our everyday life. So there are rain coming from the top, water splashing from the bus, someone spitting here, and not just that, we have pool of water on the ground we are walking as well. So this is like compound events, multiple extremes acting together. Yeah, and to survive this, we really need to learn some circles, right? So these kind of events are increasing and happening. So take an example of a coastal city like Mumbai or Kolkata or other. Yeah. So these cities are, I mean, faced with multiple extremes. So some of these extremes can act together. So when there is a cyclone, there could be a background sea level rise, storm surge and waves, heavy rainfall. All these can lead to prolonged floods over these regions. And at the same time, if you look at the dry events, water scarcity can overlap with heat waves, reduction of river flows because the glaciers have lost their ice, and heat waves, all these happening together. So these kind of events we are seeing. I am part of the IPCC's report. So what we are seeing is that in India and across the globe, these kind of events are increasing. So that comes to our earlier picture, which I showed for Mumbai. So places like this, which are low-lying lands and exposed to these kind of changes, heavy rainfall events, cyclones, storm surges, and the adaptive capacity to this climate change is very low. And we have changed the scenario quite huge. You see that line in the middle of this. that is supposed to be a big river. That's supposed to be a Muttar River in Mumbai that has been squeezed into a small canal. It's waterlogged always. So when you have floods, extremes, it doesn't hold the water and all this area gets flooded. So to combat that, we have many ways. One is to work on our climate change policy. We have a climate change policy, but it's not followed up very well. We promised about 100 gigawatts of solar power by end of 2022, but only a few, maybe around 30, 32 has been functional until now. So we need to work on that. So which means that because the carbon dioxide lifetime is quite huge, the extremes are here to stay. We need to adapt and mitigate. And one more thing I have added, including adapt and mitigation, is innovate. So youngsters like you, you should work on how we can be innovative on energy efficient systems so that carbon dioxide can be reduced in the atmosphere. Or can we have methods to sequester and store this carbon dioxide, right? So until then, we need to work on adaptation and mitigation of these extreme weather events. That's all for today. I hope you have got the message very clear and striking at you. The weather is changing, and we need to work on that. Thank you. Thank you, Artri, and everyone for listening to this talk.
Thank you, Dr. Rocky. I think Pompey will now pick up questions for you. It's there.
No, I will, ma'am, I'm here.
Yeah, sure. Sure, Pompey.
Yeah, so we have few questions for you here. Raju Kalita is asking, sir, why is the climate of Meghalaya so unstable? He's saying the climate varies here in few kilometers. Like if it is raining at my place, Shillong, then at the same time, 200 to 300 meters away, one cannot find any rain. Why this happens here? And how can we explain this kind of climatic behavior in Meghalaya using any kind of in situ or satellite measurements?
Hi, exactly. So this kind of microclimate change is happening not just in Meghalaya, but if you see the West Coast. So some days back, some reporters were calling me and asking, okay, even when it rained in Mumbai, there were some regions where you got heavy rainfall events and some regions where we didn't get that kind of heavy rainfall events. So these cloud systems and rainfalls are like popcorns, and their sensitivity to warm temperatures are quite huge. Convection response is quite sensitive. So the warmer the temperatures, the more unstable these systems could, it makes these systems more unstable. Yeah. And at the same time, there has been many studies which shows that cloud systems, especially the stratocumulus kind of cloud systems, which are the larger cloud systems, there has been a study in Nature Climate Change which showed that because of increased heating, these cloud systems are becoming more scattered. So there are two things: the atmosphere is becoming much more unstable. So response can be like popcorns across, and also these cloud systems might, instead of having a singular large-scale cloud system, you might have more of smaller convective scale systems. So these are mesoscale climate systems which we need to understand more. So these kind of activities are happening across the globe. We need to understand more. But this is happening because of a response to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Vijay Majumdar. He is asking, sir, irrespective of the weather extremes, this year monsoon has been good and we have an all-time record production. How will you explain this contradiction? Is this a manifestation of something indifferent, or it's just a blessing in disgrace?
Yeah, of course, the monsoon system is quite well interacting with the conditions around. So I'm giving an example of Indian Ocean because I work a lot on the Indian Ocean, and that's easy to tell. So I told you that the Indian Ocean is warming and it reacts with the monsoon system. Okay, but the warming anomalies each year could be at a different location each year, and based on that, the the circulation of the monsoon, the low pressure systems, the monsoon westerlies, all these things act differently. So on a large scale, we are seeing that the monsoon circulation is weakening, but at the same time, there are fluctuations in the monsoon westerlies. So because of these fluctuations, you get some periods when there are very heavy rainfall events and some periods when it is very big. So this year, we saw that the Arabian Sea is quite warm, 2 to 3 degrees Celsius warm. It can support a lot of moisture. And at the same time, on the right, on the east, the Bay of Bengal was also productive in terms of low pressure systems. And these monsoon westerlies and the low pressure systems act together. The low pressure system acts as the dynamic core, steering these monsoon westerlies from the Arabian Sea. So this kind of activity was quite large, probably because the North Indian Ocean was quite warm, both Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal. So that could be a reason why we got a lot of rains. So these kind of small systems and fluctuations were quite huge. So, and at the same time, if you look at the large scale conditions, the Pacific, we had more La Nina kind of conditions, right? So when you have a cool East Pacific, it helps the monsoon monsoon a lot. So all these factors together, so remote conditions helping the monsoon to be stronger than usual, and local conditions providing more moisture supply. So this has helped the monsoon this year. But a La Nina may not be there to rescue every year. In fact, we are what is projected is that climate change projections shows that extreme El Nino cases are on the rise, which can be detrimental for the monsoon. And La Nina cases are not showing that much of a rise. So, yeah, this could be a blessing, like you said. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So we have another query from Trishanu Banik. He is saying, climate change has a wide range of impacts on rainfall, thunderstorm, and lightning. So how to quantify the impact over a specific region, whether the extreme events will increase or decrease there? For example, over Northeast India, how much climate change impacts the extreme event scenario over Northeast India?
So, yeah, so in my talk, I like of kind of generalized, right, for all over India, and regional aspects are quite stark actually, in fact, which is why looking at all India rainfall is not an answer if you want to understand the changes in rainfall over India. So if you look at Northeast and all, the changes are different, right? So the reason is that the climate change we have seen interacts with the local topography. So orography is important factor. Local dynamics is quite important. Local thermodynamics is important. So if you want to study how climate change is affecting regionally or rainfall is changing regionally, we will have to look at both large-scale changes and also how it is interacting with the regional condition, temperature changes, regional orography as well. So these factors will be quite important, and the location where along the coast or inland where it is located, and how either the depressions reach there or the monsoon circulation affects that. So monsoon Hartley circulation has its limbs of ascending motion and descending motion. So where in this region where it affects locally. So these aspects have to be studied if you want much more insight into these changes.
Thank you, sir. Here another query is from Arundhati. She is asking, she's saying attacks of locust, types of insect and subsequent crops, destruction and famine events are there in the literature. Can we trace extreme weather of historical time with that information?
Oh, I didn't get the question totally.
Sir, it is there. You can also read
Yeah,
from
yeah.
the chat box. Yeah.
Yeah, so attacks of locust type of insects and impact on crops and all and famine events are there in literature. Can we trace extreme weather of historical time with that
Yeah.
information? Okay, so it may be possible to some extent, but if you want to look at the trends and all, it may be quite difficult because we don't have long. I mean, if you want to go beyond, 30, 40 years back in the past, we might have some temperature, ocean temperature data from cruises, ship cruises, but the cyclone and depression data, rainfall data might be very difficult. Yeah. But if it is only over India, we might we have good long-term data for rainfall, more than 100 years. We have the IMD has some cyclone information on a long term, but satellite-based information is much better for the reason. So we can of course go back into time, look at the literature. It will be a difficult thing, but if you want to look at the trends and all, it will be better to focus on the last several decades since 1980s.
Thank you, sir. So Raju Mandal is asking that climate change affects ocean warming. Ocean warming also aggravating climate change. And the second aspect is often ignored. Why is it so?
So I hope I understood the question totally. So we are seeing climate change affecting ocean warming, and this ocean warming is one way the ocean warming is affecting the climate change is because ocean has a capacity for storing carbon dioxide, right? And as we saw, not only the carbon dioxide, but also the temperature. So 93% of the additional heat from global warming has gone into the ocean. But as ocean warms more, the capacity to store this carbon dioxide, the solubility for the carbon dioxide and the temperature is decreasing. So more ocean warms, it loses its ability to store the heat and the carbon dioxide. So the ocean starts absorbing less carbon dioxide and less temperature. So this is probably we are already witnessing. I think more like Raju says, this is an aspect that has not been explored that much, though statistical analysis on the data based on data is there. So I think we need more data. So one problem is that carbon fluxes, PCO2 fluxes and all for the ocean is still lacking. We don't know, especially Indian Ocean and all, how much of a sink it is, carbon sink it is, how much of a carbon source it is. So there are still debates on that. So we need more monitoring of the oceans, especially the tropical oceans where the reaction is much more. So we need such kind of data and experiments to understand how it is changing over time, right? Yeah.
Thank you, sir. We have another question from Shubhrajit Rath. He's asking how ocean warming affect distribution of corals.
This is an aspect I wanted to really talk and give in this talk, but due to short time, I had skipped it. So there is something called marine heat waves. Okay, and this is a new term which now we are frequently using in the recent IPCC report also. So marine heat waves are something like heat waves over the land, but just they are over the ocean. So statistically speaking, they are above the 90% percentile. So these heat waves are having a huge impact on the coral reefs. So coral reefs are just about 0.1% of the global oceans, 0.1%. But 25% of the marine biodiversity are in the coral reefs. which means that the marine ecosystem is dependent on the coral reefs. Now the problem comes with extreme heat. Coral reefs have a tolerance range. It is around 26 up to maybe from around 26 to 28 degrees Celsius they can withstand. But above that, they start bleaching. So coral reefs have a membrane around them. It's a mucous membrane called zooxanthellae, and it is this membrane that gives its protection and also its bright, nice, beautiful colors. Now, when there is very strong heating, these marine heat waves are happening. This zooxanthellae gets stretched out, and the coral starts bleaching, which is when it becomes white in color. So so when these marine heat waves happens again and again, it damages the coral ecosystem. So we have been seeing that marine heat waves are increasing recently. So I showed that high temperatures in the Bay of Bengal prior to Cyclone Amphan, right? So these are marine heat waves. So it is the same marine heat waves which triggered Cyclone Amphan into intensification. It's the same marine heat waves that actually damaged some of the corals in Gulf of Manaar, in Bay of Bengal this year. Yeah, so which means that these events are creeping into all kind of ecosystems, cyclones and coral reefs and all. So this is happening, and marine heat waves are predicted to increase further with increased ocean warming. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Actually, we are ahead of time now. So if there are a few more questions, if I'm allowed to ask, I'll ask. So it's like 11:30.
I can take 2 or 3 more questions. That's okay. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So another question from Chakradhar Rao. He's asking, what are the techniques used to find transport efficiency of aerosol from continental region towards oceanic regions?
Transport efficiency of aerosols. So one thing, I'm not an aerosol expert. I barely study on aerosols, but one thing I have seen that many,
I have a question.
at least some of my at least some of my colleagues have explored to trace back, along with the wind trajectory and all, how the aerosols move around the environment, land and atmospheric environment. So such kind of studies, maybe tracing and track backing can be used technically, I guess, but maybe I think someone else can help later in time, yeah, to answer that question.
Yeah, you can find out people working on that area, and you can just contact and ask your and put your queries. People are nice to answer actually.
Ma'am, I didn't. Sorry, ma'am.
No, I said that who are interested in learning about aerosols in a big details, they can contact people working on those fields specifically, and then they can discuss with them also. I mean, sending a mail sometimes helps if you're really interested.
Yeah, and I am available. I mean, through email. Any questions you guys have, you can shoot an email. My website is also there. You can just Google, and you can references of some of the work I presented here are on my website. So I see that Professor Imam Ali has a question on that. I showed a slide where there is a overall decrease in rainfall, and at the same time extreme rainfall events increasing. He asked if I can elaborate on that part. So from what I understand is, so this we explored through scientific papers. What we have seen is that the monsoon circulation has a localized weakening. So the monsoon circulation, the Hadley cell circulation has weakened. So there is more subsidence happening, and generally the monsoon westerly, at least locally, has weakened over India because of a decrease in land sea temperature gradient. So I didn't explain all these details now, because what we saw is that the Indian Ocean is warming much more rapidly than the land if you look at the past 60 years. So land sea temperature gradient is one of the factors driving this monsoon circulation. And it's not just the surface of the land, it's also the entire troposphere. So once the monsoon arrives and falls, rains fall on the land also, there is a latent heat release. So this land sea temperature gradient is still functional in the troposphere. We call it troposphere temperature gradient. So this gradient has kind of, there is a weakening, at least locally, in the South Asian domain. So this is what we have identified as one of the reasons for weakening of the rainfall, especially on parts of central India. Now, at the same time, what we see is that the Arabian Sea is also warming a lot, and a lot of moisture during monsoon generally comes from the Arabian Sea, Western Indian Ocean region. Okay, and there is because of warm conditions, the monsoon westerlies, though it is weak, the monsoon westerly is weak, it is showing much more variability. So the variability of monsoon westerlies have increased. So at times, there are episodes when the monsoon is very strong. So, and there is a lot of available moisture from the Arabian Sea, Western Indian Ocean region. So there are episodes when a lot of moisture is suddenly taken from the Arabian Sea and pumped into mainland India. So this is happening much more frequently and resulting in these kind of heavy rainfall events. So this is one kind of explanation for that. There is also interaction with the low pressure systems and all, which I am not explaining here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Rautri Deshmukh to take over the session from here.
Thank you, Gompi. Thank you, Dr. Roxy, for a nice talk actually, and followed by nice interaction by the participants. It's really nice, and we will have to stop here because time is up, and people have other works also. You should be busy after that. And then what I would like to request you to be present, if possible, in the concluding session. Just 15 minutes more tomorrow, if you can spare. I mean, I would like to have all the experts there, if possible, be there, because you have other engagements, no problem. Dr. Narendra Singh from ARI saying that nice informative session. So, okay. So we stop here. Anyone? I don't think anyone have any problem. Otherwise, interaction will go on. I would like to thank everybody for being here, and I would like to thank Roxy for being here with us. I mean, I am thanking him on behalf of the organizers as well as the participants, because individually they cannot express their gratitude here. But in the last session, concluding session, we will hear from them. So we stop here for today, and tomorrow with the same thing, same meet link, we will be here.
And I just want to just before concluding, I just want to give a message. We at the IITM are open for collaborations and interactions. So many times students from the academic side may be shy to approach us, but we are open for collaborations. We are not just working with our own teams, but we are open for collaborations. So if you have interesting problems, you are open for collaborations, both professors and students at Assam University and across. Thank you. Thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, Pompi, can we stop here? Pompi Devolina, can you stop here?
Okay, yes, ma'am. Actually, ma'am, the participants some of them are telling to share the link for the attendance.
It has been shared to us. So whoever has joined later than that, they will not get the link. I mean, joining the last part of the event or during only